let's hear from the reason we really came to the Zoom meeting today. I want to introduce Annette, who is one of my favorite writers. I met her a couple of years ago at Killer Nashville. And and started reading her book. I read the first one just out of courtesy because I met her, and it was called Circle of Influence. If you all have not gotten hooked on the Zoe Chambers series, I highly recommend it, especially now that we're in quarantine and you have a lot of time, because you will want to go from one to the other to the other. She's a New York Times bestselling author. She's a former
USA Today bestselling author. USA Today. I haven't hit the New York.
Oh, sorry, USA. Yes, and she has been defeated for the Agatha Award. She has been defeated for the Agatha Award 5 times, but in her defense, by really well-known writers. So it is an honor to welcome my friend Annette.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here, and I keep saying that this pandemic is awful, but if we have to have a pandemic, at least we are having one at a time when we have this technology to get together. And it's a lot easier for me to talk to your group here from my office than driving there. So this is great. I was asked to talk about the topic of reading like a writer. And when Jackie first mentioned that, I had my own idea of what that meant, but I've done some reading and some research about what others consider that to be, and was quite happy to learn that it's pretty much the same thing that I was thinking of. So basically, I think an argument could be made that all you need to do to learn to write is to read novels. Now, considering the number of craft books that I have on my shelves here in my office, I'm not going to go quite that far. And we all love going to conferences when that's a possibility and learning from that way. But I do get some of my own best how-to tips and answers to problems just from reading and rereading my favorite novels. So I thought that we would look at this topic on 3 different levels. The big main level is almost like taking a master class in fiction. And to do that, I mean, we all have our favorite books that we've read and that we keep on the shelf. So what you can do for a master class in fiction is to simply pick up one of your books that you've already read and loved, one that inspires you, and I mean, we've all read a book that says, man, I wish I could write like this, or I want to write like this when I grew up, that sort of thing. So pick up a book that you've already read that you love and reread it, but with a different eye. You want to take notes. I always have sticky notes, little sticky flags, and a notebook with me when I'm doing this. And just read it with an eye toward the author's choices and how they handle the narrative, and just any topic that you want to focus on. Make notes as you read. And you can start out with the big picture items, like the plot structure, for example. What kind of plot structure is that author using in the book? Are they doing a 3-act structure, or are they using the hero's journey, or some other way? Just take note of how they reveal plot turns and those sort of things along as you read. And as you're doing that, you can also look at what I call smaller ticket items, such as going scene by scene. So you're looking at it overall as the whole book, how the plot's progressing, but also how the plot progresses in each individual scene. Ask yourself, what is the scene's purpose? And a lot of things that you're asking yourself about this book and taking notes on are things that you might be asking yourself as you're writing your own book. You know, why am I writing this scene? So look at a book that's done by somebody that an author that you really admire, and see how they do it. Ask yourself as you're reading scene by scene, what's the protagonist's goal in this scene? What's their motivation, and what's the conflict? What's keeping the protagonist, the hero of that scene, from getting what they want? And finally, as you're getting to the end of the book, really examine the climatic scene, the big scene towards the end, and how the author handles that. And when you're done, just ask yourself, how did the hero or the protagonist grow? How have they been changed over the course of the book? And these are all lessons that we need, and all things that we need to put into our own writing. So it's really helpful to see how somebody else does that. So that's if you're giving yourself a master class in fiction, and looking at all the little details, breaking them down. What I like to do, and I do this quite a bit, is looking for specific help on something. Isolate specific needs of your own. Perhaps you've gotten feedback from beta readers or your critique group that you're lacking in some area. None of us wants to hear that, but we all have our issues that we're, things that we're good at, things that we're less good at. So focus on how other authors deal with those things that you maybe feel you don't handle so well. I know myself, there's what areas I lack in, or when I pick up a book and I'm reading it and an author handles that topic especially well, I'm really excited. How did they do that? So with that in mind, if you want to kind of figure out how something should be done that you're maybe not doing well, grab one of those books off the shelf. There's an instructor at our local Seton Hill College who teaches not just mystery fiction, but fiction in general. And he's also one of my mentors, Timon Zazayas, and he calls this field recon. If there's something that you are lacking in, that you want to find out how it's done, search out the books on your shelf or the library. I have some go-to books, go-to authors that I'm always referring back to. Craig Johnson is who does the Longmire series. I think does action scenes really, really well. He does so much so really well, dialogue and such. And for me though, action scenes are hard. I tend to want to put too much information there, blow by blow, and that really slows the pace. So he does it well, and that's the author that I pull his books off the shelf whenever I need to write fiction or write action. Another one of my favorites is Julia Spencer Fleming, and I have all of their books. So. And I think Julia Spencer Fleming is just fabulous in just the use of language. If I feel like I'm using the same verbs over and over and over again, I will pull out one of her books and just start reading and seeing how she does description and language and emotion. She's got a very powerful way with emotion. And I just want to clarify, first of all, that I'm not talking plagiarism. I'm not saying go to their books and lift whole passages. I'm just saying read and see how they use the language. I may not live passages. I confess that I steal verbs. I'm a verb thief. I keep a notebook, and not just verbs, but words, and they don't have to be strange words. They're maybe just words that I hear and I think, oh, I haven't used that in a book, and that's a really great word. And it can be something very simple. It's just something I've not thought of, and I write them down. I've got a word journal. Uh, so you can do things like that, and like I said, Julia Spencer Fleming uses a lot of different verbs than what I would think of on my own. So besides picking out actual words or verbs, though, just study their technique. The authors that you really enjoy reading. Why do you enjoy reading that author? What about the way they turn a phrase that draws you in? And what about how do they make you feel like you're in the scene with them? So it's just kind of picking apart the prose. And again, like I say, I do sticky notes. I don't know if you can see, but I've got pages sticky noted, so that I can refer back to certain scenes going as I'm going on, for whatever reason. And then the third, that's the second way of looking at reading as a writer. The third is something that you can do or not do, depending on how. Somebody once told me they can't read like a reader anymore. They don't read for enjoyment, because every time they pick up a book, they start slipping into critique mode or editing mode. So the third level of this is just reading something new. And you can do it two ways. You can either read the book just for enjoyment, if you can still manage to do that. Just go through it, and I still would be noted if I notice something in a book that I'm reading that really is like, wow, that is, I love the way they phrase that. So sticky flags again, mark the page so that you can come back to it. If you have not been able to read just for enjoyment, and you're reading it with a critical eye even for the first time, same thing, have those sticky flags. Depending on how you feel about marking up book pages, I confess I've been known to take a highlighter and mark passages that really I wanted to explore a little deeper. But some people go, you can't do that. That's akin to dog earing a book. You don't do that. So I'm no judgment. But again, as you're reading something, if it's a book that you're really enjoying for whatever reason, if it's the language, if it's the pacing, if it's just something as basic as sentence structure, take note of how the author is doing what they're doing to grab you. And learn from that. Don't steal from it, but learn, figure it out, and figure out how you can use those techniques yourself. So that's pretty much what I have come up with as far as reading as a writer, and I'm happy to answer questions. Let's see, Angeline says it helps sometimes to just write out passages in longhand, helps to get a feel for the rhythm. Yes, that's very true. I think we all find different techniques that work for us. I go back and forth between playing on the computer but it does. Writing longhand in a notebook uses a different part of the brain. And sometimes if you're stuck on the computer, just walking away and sitting down on the couch with a notebook and writing is definitely a help. So, anybody have any questions? Yeah, Jackie.
Reading. sometimes reading aloud what you've written will, or what someone else has written will make it seem more real to you if you're an auditory learner.
Yes, yes. And for your own writing, I know I'm a little slow on the technology too, but I discovered Word has a read aloud function. Have you tried that yet?
No, I do it myself.
Well, the thing about using the computer is that it's just a plain old block computerized voice with no inflection, and you pick out a lot more that way that you've missed. That the words aren't doing all the work. If it's the tone that you're hearing in your head, the reader might not pick that up. So it's another tool. But I pick up the missed words that I can't see in my own work because I know I autofill.
Yeah.
You find that sort of thing. But yeah, for auditory learners and reading out loud a book or having someone read it to you is nice too.
I think one of the things that Angela was pointing out with the longhand is that she and I, and I think a few others, attended another writing group here in Memphis, and the coordinator of it gave out a homework assignment of going and looking at another writer's piece of work, a paragraph, and then have us go in and rewrite it in our words to try to mimic their style, their technique, to see if we can capture how it is that they're doing something. And that was a very interesting exercise, depending on what author you pick.
Yeah, that would be fun to do. I make a note of that myself. And Barbara says about the read aloud feature. Yes, it's monotone, but it helps. It also helps pick up extra words that are often overlooked. Yeah. You start and duplicate words, echoes. I pick up a lot of those in my own writing through that read aloud feature.
Dutch.
Hey, I had a question. Can you talk to us about plotting of your books? Do you do a lot of outlining and plotting before you actually start writing, or is it kind of how does your flow go?
Oh, the plotter versus pantser question. Okay, I'm kind of a hybrid, and I firmly believe my 10th book is coming out next month, and I'm a firm believer that if you decided that you're a plotter, you don't have to be a plotter in every book that you write. I started out being a plotter because one of my mentors was a plotter, and she said that you have to plot. There's no other way to write. You have to plot. So I plotted, and then I sort of got more towards being a pantser, and I wrote one book by the seat of my pants. Just wrote it, whatever came to me, and had so much work to do in the editing phase that I decided that really didn't work for me either. So what I tend to do, what I'm currently doing, I say I'm a hybrid, is I know before I start writing, or very early in the writing process, I know who done it and I know why. And so I basically know the end. And I know a few of the plot twists that I want to throw in there along the way, but I don't know every little detail. I think if I plotted out in all that detail, I would never get around to writing it, or I would miss my deadline because it would be like writing it, throwing in an extra round of edits. But I look at my plot, my outline, as a roadmap, and I know I'm starting here, and I know I have to get to here, and I know a couple stops along the way that I need to make. But in between those stops, I can go off onto a tangent and explore the back roads and let the characters take me where they want to go. And the other question that I've gotten asked along that same line is, since I know who done it at the very beginning, has that ever changed by the time I got to the end? And at this point, I'll say that no, I've always stuck with that, but I've got a critique buddy, a real close friend who every book she's written, she's changed it. She's known at the beginning who was the killer, and by the time she got to the end, she changed it. So everybody has their own way of doing things. I can tell you how I do it, but that doesn't mean it's how you need to do it. Looking at, okay, what are some of the comments we got here? Oh yeah, outline and pantser. Who do I read for pacing help? Craig Johnson is one of my favorites because although I think his very first book, I love it, The Cold Dish, it was a little slower paced, but his subsequent books have been much quicker. So he's my go-to on that. And the characters seem to write what they want. Yeah, the characters do what they want to do. My husband, I was talking in front of a group of people at one point at a book event and saying about how my characters had taken over and had taken me in a different direction that I wanted to. And he pointed out to me that you're the writer, you're in control. You can make them do what you want. Clearly my husband is not a writer.
So let me ask you a question whenever it comes to readers, because, we write, and every time we write something, it's always surprising to see how a reader interprets what it is that you're trying to tell. I especially find that true when it comes to critique groups. So I'm wondering, how do you address your readership whenever you think you've done something in one of your books that is very effective, whether it be a fight scene or dialogue or love scene or something, and your reader comes up and says, that just didn't work. How do you pick their mind to know how to make it more reader friendly? I guess that's what I'm trying to say. How do you get your reader feedback to know how to make changes as a writer?
I'm going to assume you're talking about like beta readers and critique readers as opposed to
anyone, actually. I mean, because once you got a book published, someone's going to come up and say that sucked. That scene really did what was really great or something.
It wouldn't happen like that. Yeah, that's the one you don't want to get. You hate the ones that come after it's published because you can't go back and do anything about it. But when it comes to, I'm going to address the pre-readers, the pre-publication readers. I've got a critique group. There's 4 of us, so there's 3 sets of eyes there that read my work very early on, and then I've got another friend who jumps in and helps a lot, and then I've got a beta reader who reads from beginning to end. They've not seen the little chunks like the critique group has, so they get a fresh set of eyes. And then there's my publishers, editors, and the proofreaders. So there are a lot of eyes and a lot of opinions that read and comment on my pages. I'll tell you right now, I'm starting a brand new series. I'm like 35 pages into a new book with new characters and new location and everything. And I'm going through what you're talking about, Lynn, right now with my critique group, because I send them pages, and I just had, and the funny thing is all 3 of them come back with different things in mind that didn't work. I guess you have to take into consideration when you're getting that sort of feedback, how much weight you want to give that person. My critique buddies, I give a lot of weight to. They're 3 published authors. They know my work, they know my voice. So I'm going to give them a lot of their comments, a lot of consideration. Although, and even in their case, and even in my editors' comments, I've learned that what they're commenting on and maybe what they're suggesting needs changed indicates that there's a problem. But if I don't agree with what they're suggesting in the way of a change, the problem might not be what they're saying. It might indicate something needs to be addressed elsewhere in the book. It's hard to without specific instance, but a lot of times it's simply a line of dialogue. If a reader, critique group, beta reader says, that wouldn't happen, there's that's not working, your detective or your cop would catch that, wouldn't believe that. A lot of times if I'm like, but yeah, I really need that either for the plot or because I feel strongly that particular issue needs to stay there, it might simply be as easy a fix as going back and having one of the other characters question the same question that your beta reader just asked you. Well, what about this? Well, have one of your characters say, well, what about this? And then another character can answer and respond to that the way that you want to respond to your critique reader. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, it does. I had a situation like that happen with the critique group, which I'm going to say Jackie and Richard. See, you're on mute, so I can talk about you. But it helped because it made me go back and have to address something which I ended up doing in another scene. So it's nice to get the consistency. So that's why I was wondering, how do you go about filtering and knowing what it is that the reader is trying to interpret as to what it is you're trying to do? Barbara, did you have a question? I know you put something in. I'm going to unmute you if you want to ask or make a comment.
Yes, I had a manuscript that I was working on which had the name of my church in it back in the 1800s rather. And I knew the name was correct, but somebody kept telling me no, that those two, it was like Methodist Episcopal. And they said those two were not connected at that time. How do you answer them when you know the facts are correct? And still, most people would not realize that they were correct.
Yeah, with historicals, that's always a big issue. Two of my critique buddies write historical, so we're always checking on the validity of what they're writing. And Barbara, are you talking about like critique readers or somebody who's read the finished book, or
someone who had read the finished book?
Okay.
And I knew that the answer was correct. I knew it was correct because, like I said, I had researched it at my church. It was my church that I was talking about.
Yeah. Well, just because you're sure of something doesn't mean you're right. And I'm talking about the reader in this case, not you. So, yeah, if somebody's calling you on something like that and they're a beta reader and you're right, then it's your name on the book, so you have to go with your own your own feelings about that. If it's somebody who is just a reader reading your already published book and they're giving you a rough time, it's published, you can't change it, you wouldn't change it anyway. So when readers come to me and start getting on me about something that's already published, it wouldn't have happened that way. You have to deter. A lot of times, to just do not engage. As a published author, a lot of times it's just best to, not get into that because you end up getting into an argument and there's hard feelings. I have been known to email somebody who has, emailed me with a comment like that and just thank them for their opinion and maybe, remind them that it's fiction and that you had to make a change for the sake of the pace of the story and, something like that. But hey, when you're right, you're probably not going to win any brownie points for arguing with them. So just, thank them kindly for their interest in the book and let it go from there.
A question.
You're
Yes,
unmuted.
Jack?
Okay, Annette, you mentioned a couple of times about critique groups.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about how important a critique group is?
Oh, I wouldn't be published if I didn't have my critique group. And I've been in many critique groups over the years. I've been in a number of very large online critique groups where we exchanged everything over email or whatever. And I've been in person-to-person critique groups. Every different kind of critique group you can imagine, I have probably been in at one point or another. To go back to, I think it was Lynn's question, somebody asked a question about, how much weight do you give critique groups or readers in general. If you're in a group that you maybe don't know everybody, or everybody doesn't have the same skill level, you have to weigh that and take that into consideration. The group that I'm in right now, like I said, are all published authors, and they're all fabulous, and I am so lucky to be in. I hate the idea of parting company with these people, because critique groups are like, when you get a really good one, it's like family. It's people that you trust, and that you're trusting them with your baby, your words, your book. So having that level of trust is really, I think, vital. On the same line, if you're in a critique group and if the dynamics start to change, leaving a critique group that you've outgrown is something that's hard to do, but you need to, learn to do it. I've done it a number of times, and it's I don't want to compare it to getting a divorce, because I'm not ever had to go through a divorce, but it's akin to that, because there can be hard feelings, and it's hard to do. But yeah, I really need my critique group, because they are the first eyes that see the book, and they make the catches before I get too far into the story. When it's still fixable easily. Mute.
Lynn,
Yes.
do you have more than one critique group at a time? Do you belong to more than one? And are they online or in person?
Mine?
Yes.
Right now I'm just in one. I have belonged to more than one at a time. Yeah, here's another thing that comes up when you have a critique group. No matter what, it happens in mine. You have two people giving you the exact opposite feedback. And I always figure I'm the tiebreaker in that case, because it's my book. But when they all agree on something, it's like, oh man, yeah, there's a problem there, I need to fix it. But if you have one person saying that they love it and another person saying, oh, I really hate that, then you have to look into it. I have, though, to answer your question, Jackie, I have belonged to more than one at the same time, and it just, I don't think I could do it now that I'm writing toward a contract. When you have a deadline, it's you don't have all the spare time to read. It's not just getting the feedback from everybody and getting opposing feedback, but it's keeping up your end of it and reading everybody else's work too, right. and not cheating on that, but really giving them the attention they deserve. That's where it gets to be hard when you get into too big of a critique group, I think, or too many at the same time. Reading some of the comments. Okay, we already talked about that. Oh. Yeah, I think that was the question more, is about what to do when others question it. You're right. Well,
let me ask you, if you could tell us the 5 top tips that we as a writer need to make for sure we give the reader?
5.
Yeah, or at least, at least the top 5, because, depending on what genre you're writing, like if you're writing horror, you want to make for sure you got a lot of kill, you got a lot of suspense, you got some darkness going on, you got your typical stuff. So what type of elements do you think that us as writers need to make for sure that we include that the reader is going to expect?
Okay. You want your characters to be 3-dimensional. You don't want just your good guys have to have some flaws. Since the advent of Gone Girl, of course, there's all these unlikable protagonists that I'm not really into. But you want your main characters to not be, your protagonist not to be all good, and you don't want your villain to be all bad. You need to flesh them out a little bit so that your reader actually, I like having a villain that the reader has some understanding of or some sympathy for. And I like to read stories about that way you get into the reader's heart as well as getting into their mind. So I think having a cast of well fleshed out characters is one. For mystery authors, playing fair is vital. Not just dropping your villain or the killer in at the very end of the book, but having them there and having the clues accessible so that the reader may, if a reader comes to me and tells me that they know who done it, before I got to the end, I'm not really too upset. I like it when they say, oh, I didn't see that coming, but I also like to know that I did play fair and that they did pick up on the clues because the clues are there. So you want to make sure, of course, it's a different game if you're writing a thriller, but for mysteries, which is my field, you want to play fair with the reader. And of course, then there's just the basic stuff of not putting a lot of backstory up front. Letting the reader, when they start reading those opening chapters, have some questions. They don't need to know everything. You want to have the reader asking questions so they want to keep turning the page and learn the answers later on. Oh, that's 3. I was thinking of 2 more and my mind just fuzzed out on me. It's snow, No, I know. Research. Barbara, of course, has researched her historical, so she knows the facts are there. I like doing research. You want to research so that you don't have your readers coming to you and saying that's wrong, if at all possible. But on that same level, not putting everything that you've learned on the page. I'm a firm believer in doing I do Writers Police Academy and different citizens police academies, so that I learn all this stuff, but I don't put everything I know on the page. I think if you immerse yourself in your research and you know it and just sprinkle a little bit of it in your story, then your reader will automatically realize that, okay, this is a good source. This person knows what they're talking about. So that's 4.
That's fine. I put you on the spot. I just, I know that there are certain things that you need to hit and note whenever you're doing as a reader. I'm also kind of interested in how you use foreshadowing and maybe your little Easter eggs or clues to engage your reader. Because as a reader, you kind of, you want your reader to pick up on things. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I'll tell you, there have been times when I've planted what I thought was a clue early on, and then when I got to the end of the book and started doing the editing process, realized that I never followed up on it. So that's one thing that sometimes happens, and in that case you can either, okay, go back and rewrite to add in the stuff that you thought you might add in when this was a really good idea back on page 4 and now it doesn't mean anything. or you just go back and rewrite page 4 and take it out. What I find, because I am a hybrid and I don't work out every little detail and as I'm writing, is that a lot of times I have to go back and add the foreshadowing in, later after I've okay, oh, this happened on page 320, but I need to add a few, go back and sprinkle in a few breadcrumbs or Easter eggs, as you say, along the way to foreshadow. So it can be, that can be done a couple different ways, either as you write or go back later on.
Almost time for us to close. I want to thank Annette for coming or for showing up for Zoe Day.
New book, latest book.
Is this
self-promotion under the radar?
Under the radar, but wait, that's not the latest one, is it? No.
That's the one that came out in February. That came out in February, and then the 10th one is Till Death.
The next one is Till Death.
Yes, and that comes out next month.
All right. But start from the beginning with Circle of Influence. I mean, you can pick it up anywhere, but really Circle of Influence will hook you and you will go right on through.
Thank you, Jackie.
And I love Zoe. One of my questions was going to be, how do you keep a character going after 10 books? But you've answered that question because you said, I'm done here. I'm going to start with new characters.
Well, so I've run to the end of my contract. 10 was the end of my contract.
I see.
And I've done those 10 books without an agent, and I now have an agent who's interested in representing me for a different series to go to a different publisher. So that is, now that I've done with the contract, that's my priority. But I'm not saying I'm done with Zoe. I may come back and independently publish number 11 and 12 and whatever. So I'm not writing off Zoe. I may come back.
Oh, good. Well, I kind of get from the top, from the name of the book and from what I've read before, that I hope her mother does not get too involved in this wedding, is all I say. Because there may be a murder that was not intended, if that's the case.
Yeah, it's a rough road, that trip to the altar.
Right, yeah. I got the feeling her mother was not going to let that go so easily. But anyway, thank you so much. Does anyone have anything they want to add? Angeline, do you have you and Jim have anything you want to say about the anthology? Or
Jim and I will be having some conversations in the next couple of weeks. We have I guess because we're trying to get our situation straight, looking for another publisher at this point is on hold, but we've got some ideas about how to help our writers to develop stories for future anthologies, getting help either through critiquing or different trainings that may be available, addressing various topics that may be needed, like how to write a short story, how to plot a short, whatever. So we're working it out. But that's
okay. That's kind of what I was referring to in the beginning of the meeting. We need to get our situation straightened out with the state of Tennessee, which I'm working on. It's not as easy as I hoped it would be. Let me just say that. I hoped it would be a matter of changing our bylaws and there we go, slam bam, thank you ma'am. But no, that is not what it's going to end up being. So I ask you to have a little patience on this matter. All right. Thank you very much. We'll see you next month. We will be in touch.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, you're
the
welcome.
Outside groups. It's so valuable to have the information.
We're going to try and set up something so that even when we're meeting in person, we can offer it on Facebook or Zoom or something for people like you who don't want to come from Jonesboro every time.
Well, Annette gave us some valuable information. I don't write mysteries, but even the things that she said are very helpful to me. So thank you. I really enjoyed it.
And that's
Thank
one
you.
thing that I've tried to stress whenever I post on the other different Facebook groups is that, you know, Malice was set up to be a mystery writers group, but everyone writes just about anything and everything. And the whole point of Malice is so that way we will, is so that way we will learn how to write better and encourage each other and to write, which is what we need.
Good writing is good writing, no matter what the genre.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and almost every story, there really is no story without a little mystery. Really, there isn't. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Annette, I hope I'll see you at Killer Nashville.
We'll see. Thanks for having me.
If they have it. Well, so far so good. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.